Hello, Sunday School parents. This is the first in what will hopefully be a series of weekly videos that I will make for you. In these difficult times, we're asking you to be your kid's Sunday school teacher. We are really blessed to have the curriculum that we do that our Synod Publishing House has made available. It really looks like a wonderful curriculum for this purpose. Whatever age your kid is, you should be able to find the appropriate text or activities to share with them. You may feel a little uncertain, though, about being a Sunday school teacher. That's okay. It's a little bit of a challenge for everybody, and I'm here to help in whatever way possible, including to kind of give you some background in the story. I'll probably be going a little bit more in depth in what you will end up sharing with your child, but the more that you know about the Bible text, the more that you'll feel confident that you can do this, that you can be a teacher for your child, for your family. Hopefully, you've received the First Family Altar newsletter. If not, check your email and check that out. But we're going to talk today about Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. I won't read it to you. I'll have you read it on your own, and then if you haven't read it yet, press pause, go do so, and come back when you've finished. And now I'll kind of share a little bit of necessary background or helpful information to kind of add to our understanding of the story. First of all, it's helpful to understand the role of tax collectors in Roman society. So, the way the political situation was back then, the Roman Empire conquered a huge swath of land. People of many different ethnicities, people of many different cultures. The thing they all had in common is that they answered to Rome, to the emperor who sat in Rome, and the other thing that they all had in common is that being subjects of the Roman Empire, they were required to support the work of the Roman Empire, which meant paying taxes. So, how did the Roman Empire get those taxes? Well, they actually used people from the cultures that they conquered to be tax collectors. They would say to someone, we got a job opening and you can sign up to be a tax collector. And what that meant is that you had a certain amount of money that, if you were a tax collector, that you needed to deliver to Rome. And then you also got your livelihood and your salary from those same people who were paying taxes. So you'd knock on a guy's door, say, "Hey, you owe this money to the Roman Empire," and then you would kind of mark up a little bit for yourself. So, say if the Romans needed, we'll put it in American currency, $5 for a person, the tax collector would show up at your door, and he was supposed to say something like, "Hey, I need $6." And then he'd pay 5 to Rome, and he'd keep one for himself. It didn't take the tax collectors very long, though, to realize that actually there was no accountability. They could just kind of say whatever they wanted, and people were more or less powerless to stop them. So if the tax collector went and said, "Hey, I need $11 from you," well, Rome still gets their 5, and the tax collector gets 6. This is a recipe for disaster, right? And so tax collectors made a killing. In Jewish society, of course, this is what we're concerned with as Jesus is entering Jericho and he encounters these Jewish tax collectors. The Jewish people didn't like Roman rule, to say the least. Being God's chosen people from way back when, their understanding is that they should have autonomy. They should have their own kingdom. They shouldn't have to answer to anybody. And then the Romans come along. And so any Jewish person who affiliates with the Roman Empire in any way, that's, I don't know, imagine if the Canadians conquered us and we suddenly all have to pay taxes to Canada. And some residents of New Holstein get a job to collect taxes for the Canadian Empire. How do you think those people would be treated in our society? Yeah, they would be looked at as traitors. And that's not even factoring in kind of the extra theological level here, where the Jewish people thought that the Romans being pagans were bad news. And so any Jewish tax collector is an absolute outcast in society. And if you're an outcast to begin with, you might as well cheat the people who hate you, right? It was really an awful, vicious cycle that these tax collectors entered into. And one of them was Zacchaeus, and he probably hated his life, to be honest. He was a rich man, but he probably found a point where riches didn't make him happy. And so I'm just speculating on that because of his willingness, his desire to want to see Jesus. So he climbs this tree when he hears that this man is coming to town, this guy who he's probably heard about as a teacher, as a healer. And what a shock for Zacchaeus it must have been when Jesus said, "Hey, come down, I want to go and eat with you." Now, if you actually saw Wednesday night's sermon from our Lenten series, I talked a little bit in that sermon about what's called table fellowship, eating with people, how Jesus, by eating with these sinners, was putting himself on their level. Really a scandalous thing. And you see in our text today how upset some people were that Jesus was eating with Zacchaeus. But Jesus eats with Zacchaeus, and what's the result of that? Zacchaeus repents. He realizes, I've been doing the wrong thing. I've been ripping people off. I've been stealing from people, and that's not right. He says, I'm going to give people back what I've stolen from them. The interesting thing here is what changes Zacchaeus' heart is what changes our heart. You know, God gives us 10 commandments. We all know right from wrong. But when it comes to changing our hearts, God's law doesn't do it. God's law can convict our hearts. It can make us feel bad. But what changed Zacchaeus here was God's love. The gospel is what changes hearts. The realization that God loves us while we're still sinners. And so it's actually a motivation when we try to right our wrongs, fix what we did wrong. We realize actually Jesus already righted our wrongs. And now we're just so thankful that we're forgiven, that he accepts us despite the fact we're sinners. He accepts us. We're just overflowing with joy and want to do good things and want to rectify any wrongs that we have done. So if there's one thing that I would encourage you to teach your kids this week, it's not don't steal. Now that's a good lesson. Your kid shouldn't steal. But the number one lesson to learn from this is even thieves, even when we steal, even when we do awful things, we have a God who loves us and he forgives us and he gives us grace. There's one other really cool thing about the Zacchaeus story that I realized a few years ago. So Zacchaeus climbs up in a tree, and he is the ire of the mob is upon him. You know, Zacchaeus is the focus of a lot of people's anger and hatred as he's up there in that tree. And then Jesus comes along, and Jesus says, "Zacchaeus, you come down." And this is not just Jesus calling Zacchaeus out of a tree. This is Jesus actually starting to make a transaction. This is Jesus starting to make a trade. Zacchaeus comes out of the tree. Who goes in the tree? Jesus goes in the tree. And no, not that sycamore tree that day, but on the cross. You know, Jesus is the one who draws the crowd's anger and hatred away from Zacchaeus, and where does he put it? He puts it on himself. At the beginning of the story, everybody hates Zacchaeus. At the end of the story, a lot of these people are hating on Jesus. But this is what Jesus is willing to do, to take the heat off of Zacchaeus, the beloved child of Abraham. You are a beloved child of God. And Jesus says, I want to make a trade with you. You come down from the tree that really we ought to inhabit. The Old Testament has a line, "Cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree." We should be cursed because of our sin. We should be the ones hanging on the tree. But instead, Jesus is the one that says, I'll go in the tree. I'll take the curse away from you. So we get this trade. Zacchaeus comes down, Jesus goes up. This is a trade that Jesus makes in our life too. He calls us out of the cursed tree, and he takes, on the cross, he takes that cursed tree upon himself so that we are not cursed. What else does Jesus do? He comes and eats with us. He gives us his very body and blood in the Lord's Supper. He invites us to the heavenly banquet. You know, he actually invites himself over to our house. He says, I want to come and be a part of your life. Now, we can say no, but Jesus, as long as we let him, he's willing to come and live with us, which is actually another important lesson in this story. Jesus is the one who makes the first move. You know, we can't get to him, but he comes down to us and he says, I want to live with you. And this is what he does. And when we let him come into our house, we are blessed for it. When you are sitting around your family altars and talking about him, he's there with you. Jesus is in your house. He's going to be teaching you and your kids each week while we're going through this crisis. He's going to be teaching you, loving you, blessing you, and preparing you to sit in his house one day. God bless you.